later.
You crooner!
We'll be a bit later.
And ask her a lot of questions.
She said no.
Of which I have the answers here. The young lady in question is a young lady called Jessica Hiscocks. Good afternoon over there. The young lady is Jessica Hiscocks, and she's from a charity called Whizz-Kidz. The charity has been in operation since 1990, and she's travelled all the way down from Norwich today to tell you its objects of providing wheelchairs for children. I give you Jessica.
Can everyone hear me okay if I talk at this? Yeah, I'm quite loud, so I apologise for that. Hello everyone. My name's Jessica, but you can call me Jess because the only person who calls me Jessica is my mum when she's cross with me, so you can call me Jess today. And I work for the charity Whizz-Kidz, and I'm here today to tell you all about them. I do apologise if I didn't use my notes today. It's actually only my second Rotary talk working at this charity, so you can all chuck apples and things at me at the end, but we'll see how it goes. Yes, like I say, I've travelled down from Norwich today, but Whizz-Kidz is a national charity and we are based in London, but I'm the Eastern fundraiser, so I cover Norfolk, Suffolk, Essex, Hertfordshire, North London and South Buckinghamshire as well. So I travel around quite a bit, as you can tell. And just to tell you a little bit about me before I begin. I've got a disabled sister, so I worked at another charity before here, again dealing with children with disabilities, and it's something that I've always wanted to get into, and I feel like I do have an empathy for it because I've grown up with a sister who, she hasn't got a wheelchair but she's got Down syndrome, and it was her 25th birthday yesterday actually, but mentally she's about 4. So I've grown up around disability, so I have to work for something that I have a real passion for. So hopefully you'll go away today realising that, you know, we're a fantastic charity and there's a real kind of empathy there with what we do. So Whizz-Kidz. Now, like I say, I only started a couple of months ago, and I thought when I started it was just a charity that funded wheelchairs for disabled children because of the word whiz, you know, and the wheelchair is actually in the logo of the charity. But we actually do so much more. And when you leave today, hopefully you'll have a great knowledge of what we do, and if you've got any questions at the end, then please feel free to ask. So at this current moment in time, there are 70,000 disabled children in the UK, which is a huge number. And since 1990, we've been able to help 13,000 children by either giving them a wheelchair or giving them skills to cope with their mobility problems. And so we've done lots and lots over the years, and it all started in 1990 simply with a bloke in a bike shop. And this bloke was a gentleman called Mike Dixon. And Mike Dixon was in a bike shop, and there was a girl there who was in a wheelchair, and she was trying to reach a bike lamp which was on the top shelf. And he said to her, "Do you want me to help you with that? Do you want me to reach that bike lamp?" And she said, "No, it's okay." And she pushed a button on her wheelchair, and she had a riser in her wheelchair, which meant it could lift her up in the chair to reach the lamp. And he was so impressed by this, he kind of went away, got a little bit drunk at his Christmas party, and decided to run the London Marathon in order to start up a charity to fund wheelchairs for disabled children. And that's how Whizz-Kidz came about back in 1990. So all from that one girl that he saw in this fantastic wheelchair has grown this huge charity. So my first question when I started was, but don't the children already get wheelchairs from the NHS? And I thought, you know, that's very strange that there's a charity in place to provide children with wheelchairs. And yes, the majority of children do get their wheelchairs from the NHS. But sometimes these chairs just don't do the things that the children want to do. And also, the NHS take into account how far a child can walk. And if a child can walk over 10 steps, then the NHS don't think that they need a wheelchair. So if a child can walk from here out to that door, don't need a wheelchair. But actually, to walk from here to the toilet, then they do need a wheelchair. So that's where we come in, and we try to help all these different children. And there's lots of different ways that we do that. So to start with, we have manual wheelchairs, so the normal sort of lightweight wheelchairs that you see a lot of children in, and they can cost up to around £3,000, if not more. And basically what happens is a child has an occupational therapist, and the occupational therapist refers them to Whizz-Kidz, and they work with the child to work out what they want. So we had a child who came in, and he was 12 years old, and when he was born, his legs were basically misshapen, not formed in the way that our legs are formed, and they had to be amputated at birth. So he'd grown up with no legs, and the NHS had given him a wheelchair. But he was having real difficulties with this wheelchair because it was made in such a way that the wheels were a little bit further back. Because he didn't have any legs, he would have tipped forward in the wheelchair, so they had to make sure the balance was correct. But because the wheels on the wheelchair were quite far back, it was hurting his arms to be able to move the wheels. So he came to us and said, look, I really need a better wheelchair. And we worked with one which had wheels on the front again as well, so he wouldn't tip out. So there were two little wheels right at the front where his legs would be. And he also said, I really want to be able to do a wheelie in my wheelchair, which is what all kids want to do. All kids who have a bike, first thing they do once they've learned to ride that bike is do a wheelie. And his friend had a wheelchair where he could do a wheelie, and he was really jealous. So we said, okay, we'll see what we can do. And obviously because he had this problem with the aches in his arms as well, we worked and got together a wheelchair for him, which cost around £6,000. And he's now got this fantastic wheelchair. The first thing he did was a wheelie, and they've got a photograph and a video of him doing his wheelie. I think the occupational therapist was going to have a heart attack. She thought he was going to fall out of the chair. And he absolutely loved it. And he's actually, after watching the Paralympics this summer, he is now training to be able to compete in wheelchair races in Rio 2016. And it's all those sorts of things. It's not just the case of the child has a wheelchair, it's the independence and confidence which come from having the right wheelchair for them. So it makes a huge, huge difference. I attended a clinic recently, which is where the children come to have their wheelchair fitted. And there was a boy there who was given a brand new wheelchair. And his mum was quite resistant to him having this wheelchair because she was used to carrying him up the stairs. And it's something called learned helplessness, where parents do everything for their children because they don't want them, you know, to suffer or to be in pain. But a lot of these children can actually do things for themselves. So we had to convince his mum to take away this wheelchair because this boy was 8 years old, he was very light, but he was getting bigger and he was getting older. So in a couple of years' time, she wasn't going to be able to lift him up the stairs. She was going to hurt her own back by doing that. And so we're there to kind of help the parents as well. It can cost the NHS about £50,000 for a spinal operation for a child, and that's just because they don't have the right wheelchair. So if we can come in and spend £10,000 on the right wheelchair, we're saving the NHS money as well. So it's a big system that's all working together in order to help everyone available. We've also got powered chairs as well. So as well as the manual wheelchairs, we've got powered wheelchairs. And we've got a boy who received his powered wheelchair from us, and that chair cost £20,000. And the reason that is because it's got one of these risers that I talked about earlier. And Ben, the boy who got the wheelchair, is now 19 years old, still got his chair from a few years previously, and he's just got into the University of Cambridge and he's studying to become a civil rights lawyer. And he said the most exciting thing about getting his £20,000 wheelchair was the fact that he could go to the bar in his student pub and lift his wheelchair up and order his first pint. Which, you know, when you're 18 years old, that's what you want to do. You want to be able to go into a bar and be proud that you're 18 and pay for your first pint. And again, it's all about this independence and confidence that children have. So along with the lightweight wheelchairs and the manual wheelchairs as well, we also provide trikes, which are specialist bikes for children who are normally in wheelchairs. And it's just like one of their friends having a bike, and they can cost around £800 as well, because we want to make sure that a child can be a child and enjoy the things that their friends do as well. As well as providing wheelchairs, manual wheelchairs, powered wheelchairs and trikes, we also provide what we call wheelchair skills training, because we say giving a child a brand new wheelchair is like giving a 17-year-old a car without driving lessons. So we have to be able to show them how to use that chair. And we had one little boy who said, this is brilliant because now I can actually reverse out of my house. And it's just those simple things that we all take for granted. After I started at Whizz-Kidz, I thought about my house, and there's a step down as soon as you go through the door. And it's all those things that you really think about once you realise that children in wheelchairs, you know, wouldn't even be able to get down that step. So they learn so many different things. They kind of have different cones that they can all swizz round, you know, and make sure that they use their wheelchair properly. And they're actually taught what to do if they fall out of their wheelchair as well. So it's all the really essential things that they can learn at those sessions. We also have what we call ambassador clubs, which are clubs of children who meet up once every 2 months, and they do loads of different things. So I went to one in Norwich on Saturday, and it was so much fun because they were able to do something called life skills. So they all sat round together and chatted to each other, made different friends. We all played a massive game of boccia, which you may have seen in the Paralympics this year, which is basically, it's very similar to bowls. So people in wheelchairs can take part and children can too, because you have to keep your bum on your seat when you're doing it, which is quite hard actually, you know, when I was doing it on Saturday. And they just have so much fun, and they go away and they've made all these new friends, which they might not be able to do in other settings, because a huge percentage of the children that we look after don't actually have learning difficulties. Some do, but some, you know, are in mainstream schools. They just, you know, perhaps don't have the opportunities to meet other friends in wheelchairs as well. So it's a really, really great session. There's one in Southend, I think that's the nearest one to here, so we're trying to get them all over the country. I think we've currently got about 40 different clubs, and we're trying to raise money to be able to have even more and even more places. We also have Camp Whizz-Kidz as well, which is a special camp that the children go down to. I think it's once a year down in Kent. And they make films of their time there, they do loads of different things, have midnight feasts, all sorts. And on the Sunday of that weekend they're there, they have an inspirational speaker who comes down to talk about their life in a wheelchair. So I think quite recently they've had a Paralympian go along and talk about how they kind of got through and how they got into the Paralympics as well. And talking about the Paralympics, I'm sure some of you may have seen Hannah Cockcroft, who was one of the Paralympians who won 2 gold medals in the 100 metres and 200 metres wheelchair race. And she got her first sports wheelchair from Whizz-Kidz. So it all comes back to that, and what we're doing at the moment is we're doing something called Generation Inspired, which was after the Olympics and during the Olympics. There was a real high in the country, wasn't there? Everyone was really excited. And now it's kind of tailing off a little bit, and we're trying to keep that excitement going, especially for the Paralympics, and realise just how important it is that children are given the right wheelchair and that they have these facilities to be able to get into the Paralympics as well. So, since we started in 1990, we've been able to help 62 children in Essex with a brand new wheelchair. So it's quite a lot of children, and there's currently 6 in Essex at the moment who are awaiting a brand new wheelchair. And as you can imagine, children grow. So it's not the sense of when they're 4 years old, they get a brand new wheelchair, they're sorted. We then have to replace that wheelchair 2 years later, 4 years later, and years after that. Up until the age of 18 is when we support children with new wheelchairs, but our ambassador clubs run right up until the age of 25 as well. So we're constantly having to fit new children for new wheelchairs. And we have a scheme called Child in a Chair in a Day, because as you can imagine, it's a process, and processes take time. So from the moment the child applies to Whizz-Kidz, we have to then wait to get the funding for that specific child, and then from there we try and do all the assessment over the phone, including height, weight, all those sorts of things. So when a child comes into a clinic, that wheelchair is there waiting for them, and 9 times out of 10 they can take it home with them that day, which is so important for them, and we try to do it as quickly as possible. Usually takes around 13 weeks to be able to do that, so it's not a huge amount of time, but obviously we have to order it and all those sorts of things. And we work with different manufacturers to get the lowest cost that we can. You know, we want to make sure that we get the right wheelchair. We're not going to get a child a Primark wheelchair because it's so cheap, but we want to make sure that we get one which is correct and also at the best price as well. We work with different primary care trusts as well, so we work in allegiance with them across the country and make sure that children are fitted as quickly as possible. It's not just the wheelchairs that cost the money. Obviously the ambassador clubs, the wheelchair skills training as well, but it's all the other things that are included as well. So a cushion for a wheelchair can cost up to £500, a headrest, a seat belt, all these different things have to be added on to the wheelchair itself. So before you know it, a wheelchair could cost up to £20,000, especially if it's one of these really special ones with a riser. So it really does make a difference that we bring in every penny that we can. Now obviously I know that you must get a lot of requests from charities and a lot of speakers from charities, and every charity is fantastic, and what I'm here to do today is basically raise awareness. We're a national charity, but any money raised in Essex can stay in Essex. We're big believers in that money can be spent within your county. We used to be able to say that you could support a specific child, but unfortunately it's not as easy as that, because some children, because they're on the waiting list for quite a long time, it could be that their parents pay for their wheelchair in the time it takes to raise that money, but it can stay within the county, which I think is really important. And being a Norfolk girl, I know that I'd like my money to stay in Norfolk, so that's a really, really good thing that we can offer there. So, let me just see what else I've got here. There are 151 different wheelchair services across the country, and 151 wheelchair services offer different things. So when children do come in for their initial wheelchair provided by the NHS, it could be that one wheelchair service says we don't supply powered chairs for children under 10 years old, and that's where we come in and we try and help, because yes, children under 10 years old can have a powered wheelchair, but we have to offer that wheelchair skills training to go along with it as well. So it's all about working with all these different wheelchair skills places, all the different primary care trusts. They're all different for every single county. I can tell you now that Essex is one of the best that we work with, so we're very proud to work, especially in Southend. Really fantastic service down there. So before I finish, like I said, there's quite a few questions that we get asked. So the NHS, for example, like I mentioned earlier, the children do get their wheelchair from the NHS, but then we work even harder to make sure they get a better chair. And the child in a chair on a day scheme is something that we're really trying to work on to ensure that more children are suited to the right wheelchair for themselves. So that's kind of Whizz-Kidz in a nutshell. If anyone's got any questions they want to ask, please feel free. I will try my very best to answer them. But as I say, I've only been here 6 weeks, but I can always try and answer your question later on. So,
Jim, one question. 10-year-old children will quickly go out of a wheelchair. When you provide them with another one, what happens to the old one?
The old one, if a child comes in and they need a new wheelchair, the old wheelchair will go back to our services and it will be refurbished so another child can use it. We don't throw anything away. Because we're a charity, we're there to try and make the most of what we can and ensure that children are using the right chair for themselves as well. A lot of wheelchair services through the NHS actually give children a scaled down adult wheelchair, which isn't right for them, which is when they come to Whizz-Kidz as well. So we make sure that we use every piece of equipment as much as we can, as long as it's safe for that child, and ensure that every child has the right chair for them as well.
You did mention that the children of a certain age are too heavy to carry upstairs.
Yes.
Surely the wheelchairs don't go upstairs, do they?
That's a very good point, actually. We also supply kind of other bits of mobility equipment as well. So it could be a case that a child needs a ramp to be able to go up the stairs, and we can provide little bits and pieces like that. And it's also making sure that some children with this learned helplessness, they can actually go up the stairs by themselves, but they become so dependent on their mother carrying them up the stairs that they think, oh, well, I don't need to do it. It's a case of... Yeah, we don't do anything like stair lifts or anything like that, but like I say, it could be a case with this learned helplessness that children just become dependent on their parents carrying them up. Yeah, exactly. A lot of children can actually do that, and they actually need to be able to do that for their independence. And for those who can, to rely on a parent is almost a backward step for them, so we need to make sure that they begin to do that as well.
Okay. Is there any reason, or has there ever been an explanation to you when you supply these wheelchairs why they cost so much money compared with, say, a car? Because they appear to be about 10 times what they produce cars for, don't they? So is there a reason for that?
To be honest, I don't know the answer to that question, but when I worked at my last charity, basically anything to do with disability or anything to do with sensory equipment, then the cost would be 3 times more, because people actually need that piece of equipment to be able to do their day-to-day functions, and unfortunately that is something that they can almost capitalise on. Yeah. So like I say, we do work with the best manufacturers we can, but to be able to have that rise and lift and everything within the wheelchair, and to make sure that that works without it cutting out, is going to cost so much money to be able to do that. But I don't know the specific answer to that question, but that's kind of the mentality that I've been...
Probably the manufacturing tens of thousands.
Yeah, that's the
they're,
thing.
they're geared up and tooled up to do it.
And all these wheelchairs are so specific for the child that needs that wheelchair. So there could be 2 children who have exactly the same condition, but it could be that they each have a tiny specific requirement that's different, and so you have to manufacture that wheelchair in a different way to the other one, and add the cushions and add the headrests and everything along that. So one could cost 20,000 and one could cost 12, just for, you know, those tiny little things which need repairing and sorting out. So.
You mentioned, in fact, Essex.
Yes.
Well, we're in Upminster, Essex. That's almost a historical thing. We're actually in the London borough of Havering. So when you say Essex, you don't mean, I hope, just the county council area of Essex?
What I did was I had a look on our system of every child who falls under the county of Essex, and looked at that for how many children actually live in that area and there was actually one child in the kind of Hornchurch and Upminster area who is on our waiting list to receive a wheelchair.
But there are many more, you see.
Yes.
The London boroughs are very large.
Yes.
And Hornchurch, Havering borough is, how many is that? 250,000. 250,000 is a lot. So in fact the population is probably larger than many areas in the county of Essex.
Yes, a good
so
thing.
You want to make sure that you actually, when you say Essex, you include the London boroughs which used to be in Essex.
Yeah, to be honest, I've been with the charity 6 weeks and I'm trying to kind of build up my geography. So.
Because there's London, Havering, next door there's Redbridge, and then there's Newham, and they're all ex-Essex places. So it needs to be looked at. So you just actually leave out the point of leaving a whole bunch of youngsters who want to deal with it.
Well, no, they are being cared for. Every child in England who needs a wheelchair that we know of will be on our system. But it's the fact of, I've had a look on our system to see how many children live in Essex, but they could fall under another county or another borough. So we are looking after every child that we possibly can without the whole of the UK.
Get your sort of get it. Oh, wait, you can't see it.
There we go. There you go. Yeah,
the all-important question, finance.
Yes.
I take it you're on a paid stipend or something.
Yes.
And the rest of the finance comes purely from voluntary.
It's donations. We get very, very little help in terms of, we don't get any government funding, but we do get, for example, we have a trust fundraiser who ensures that we try and get some children in need funding, lottery funding. We were on the National Lottery a few weeks ago actually in the hope that we're actually going to be picked out of one of 8 charities to be supported. There's a day coming up soon called Tech Santa, which will be on, I think it's December the 21st. ITV is basically doing its own sort of children in need that day, and we are one of the charities that have been picked for that, and that could potentially raise £500,000 just for us, which is amazing. But it's through community, so I'm a community fundraiser, so I work with Rotary clubs, schools, churches, and then we have corporates, so Tesco, I think 4 years ago now, we were their charity of the year. But our target as a charity is around £5.5 million that we need to raise to help every single child that we can. And that's why the waiting list is so long, because we do it on a kind of date basis, so the child who's been waiting the longest we will fund next and so forth. So we're trying to raise as much as we can to help as many children as we can in all areas of fundraising. So.
Your questions? If you'd like to take a seat, I'll call upon David to give a vote of thanks, please, David.
Right. Well, Jessica, that was very, very enjoyable talk. I mean, it's very topical because the Paralympics are just over, and I must admit you've answered a lot of questions I had, because I was seeing all these different wheelchairs and thinking, you know, how do they do that? And I can appreciate that you say they're all one-offs, aren't they, the individual. I mean, I agree with John. I'm staggered by the cost of them. I think everybody must be. I had no idea a wheelchair was anything like that kind of cost, and that it had to be customised. So you've helped us a lot in that. And we've really enjoyed it all. Thank you very much for coming to see us.
Right, thank you very much. Can I remind you of menu for next week is buffet.